Chloe Vanderbilt and I were notorious frenemies. She chased after her first love's train, got into a car crash, and lost the use of her legs. I, on the other hand, had been secretly in love with my childhood friend for a decade, yet never found the courage to confess. But when the doctor announced she might never walk again, her first love didn't even have the courage to step into her hospital room. He sent a breakup text and vanished without a trace. The once adored heiress of the Vanderbilt family became volatile and sullen, leaving her parents to weep, completely helpless. I was the one who stepped forward. I knelt in front of her wheelchair and said softly, "Chloe, everything is going to be okay. I'm here with you." For the next 3 years, I stayed by her side through her rehabilitation. I slept only 2 hours a night, terrified she might give up in the darkness. When she lost control and tried to smash her own legs with a stool, I threw myself in front of her without a second thought, taking the full force of the blow. Yet, on the very day she was cleared to walk again, I overheard her talking with her friends outside the door of a private lounge. "Chloe, Ethan has been absolutely incredible to you," one of her friends said. "If it weren't for him these past 3 years, you never would have recovered this well." The next moment, another friend asked, "So, when are you going to marry him?" After a long pause, Chloe's voice drifted out, cool and distant. "I see him as a brother." Her friends' voices shot up in disbelief. "He spent 3 years by your side, and you just see him as a brother? Chloe, you can't possibly still be hung up on Julian, can you? He bolted without a single word of concern when you had your accident. Now that you're better, he just waltzes back in. You can fall for anyone, but not him." Chloe remained silent. I had allowed myself to imagine that she might come to love me, but at that moment, her meaning was painfully clear. She was healed now. It was time for the brother to make his exit. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The chatter and laughter inside died instantly. All eyes turned to me, her friends looking particularly guilty. One of them asked tentatively, "Ethan, when did you get here?" I forced a smile. "Just now." Pretending I hadn't heard a thing, I handed Chloe her gift. "Congratulations on your recovery." Just as Chloe reached for it, the door swung open again. Julian Vance stood there, his eyes glistening. "Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I heard you're all better. I came to congratulate you." The atmosphere in the room turned to ice. Chloe's friends glared at him. "What are you doing here? You ran faster than anyone when Chloe got hurt. How dare you show your face now?" Julian flushed, his eyes welling up. He shoved a gift into Chloe's hands and turned to leave. But Chloe suddenly grabbed his wrist. "Since you're here," she said, "you should stay." Everyone froze, and their heads all turned in my direction. I just stood there, the smile fixed on my face. For the rest of the party, the atmosphere was suffocatingly awkward. Chloe's friends pointedly ignored Julian while relentlessly teasing Chloe and me. "Ethan, is it true you massaged Chloe's legs every day during her rehab?" one asked. "You bet he did," another chimed in. "His technique is professional grade. Chloe wouldn't let anyone else near her. She'd throw a fit if they even tried." I kept my head down, pretending not to notice the hostile glares Julian was shooting my way. And while Chloe said nothing, I could feel that her attention was focused entirely on him. Halfway through, someone suggested a game. Julian lost the first round, and his dare was to get a woman's number. He instinctively glanced at Chloe, but she just lowered her head and busied herself with her phone, pretending not to notice. He walked over to the next booth and was quickly swarmed by a group of older, heavily made-up women. One of them, clearly drunk, grabbed his wrist. "Sure, handsome, I'll give you my number. But first, let's see what you're working with." Chloe's head snapped up. In the next instant, she was across the room, slapping the woman hard across the face. "You're asking for it." The scene erupted into chaos. Worried about her newly healed body, I rushed forward to restrain her. "Chloe, stop." Before I could finish, Chloe shoved me hard. "Get out of my way." With a loud thud, I lost my footing unexpectedly and tumbled down the stairs, the back of my head cracking hard against the floor. My vision swam with black spots as warm blood trickled down from my temple. I struggled to push myself up, only to see Chloe pulling Julian away, walking away briskly without a second glance. Her legs were perfect. They were my masterpiece. Everyone called her recovery a miracle, but we both knew the truth. There was no miracle, just me, fighting with everything I had to pull her out of the abyss, piece by piece. And now that she had walked out of that abyss, she no longer needed me. Just then, my phone rang, the sound jarring in the sudden quiet. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. The name on the screen, Mrs. Vanderbilt, felt like a physical blow. I knew exactly what this call was about. Sure enough, the moment I answered, her mother's polite, measured voice came through the line. "Ethan, dear, Chloe is now the CEO of a publicly traded corporation. Her husband cannot be someone without status, someone who can offer her no strategic advantage. I am deeply grateful for your unwavering care these past 3 years, but you must understand, if the Vanderbilts hadn't sponsored you, you wouldn't have even made it through college. Let's just call it even, shall we? She paused, likely expecting me to break down, to question her hysterically or beg pathetically. Okay, I heard myself say, my voice frighteningly calm. I'll leave. I will never see her again. I hung up and went straight to the emergency room. The gash on my forehead required 3 stitches. The doctor told me to keep it dry. After I was discharged, I saw Chloe's Maybach parked just outside the hospital entrance. The window was halfway down, and I could hear Julian's tearful voice. Chloe, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to leave. I had my reasons. My parents disapproved of us. They forced me to go abroad and even took my phone. It wasn't that I didn't want to find you. Chloe finally spoke. Then why did you come back? Julian lowered his head. Because I could never forget you. I know you have Ethan now. I'm not asking for anything. Just please, don't send me away. Just let me watch you from afar. I stood in the shadows, watching as Chloe remained silent for a long time before finally reaching out to wipe away Julian's tears. I don't blame you, she said. And as for Ethan, I just see him as a brother. It's not what you think. Julian's eyes lit up. Really? Chloe nodded. Overcome with joy, Julian pulled her into another embrace, weeping. I let out a bitter laugh, turned, and walked away, heading straight for the immigration office. The clerk handed me a form. The visa would be approved in 2 weeks. After filing the paperwork, I went back to Chloe's mansion. I had been living there for the past 3 years to make it easier to care for her. While packing my things, I found a photograph at the bottom of a drawer. It was from the day Chloe had successfully completed her physical therapy. She was actually smiling at the camera, a rare sight, and I was beside her, my own smile so wide my eyes were crescents. I stared at the picture for a long time before gently dropping it into the trash. It was long past time to wake up from certain dreams. The next morning, Chloe called. I forgot my antacids. Can you bring them to the office? Her voice was husky with sleep, her tone so casual you'd think nothing had happened the night before. I paused for a couple of seconds. Okay. When I got to her office building, the elevator doors opened to reveal Julian, holding an elaborate lunchbox. What a coincidence, Julian said with a warm smile. I'm bringing Chloe lunch. Want to join us? I said nothing and followed him into her office. Chloe was reviewing a document and arched an eyebrow when she saw us enter together. You two came together? We ran into each other on the way, Julian said, smiling as he opened the container. The rich, spicy aroma of Szechuan stir-fry filled the room. I got your favorite. My expression hardened. She has a sensitive stomach. She can't eat spicy food. Chloe shot me a look and picked up her fork. Once in a while is fine. She picked up a piece of beef dripping with chili oil and ate it without flinching. Before long, a fine sheen of sweat broke out on her forehead, and the hand holding her pen began to tremble slightly. Julian asked with concern, Chloe, are you feeling all right? She forced a smile. I still have work to do. You two can go now. I gave her one last, long look, silently placed the antacids on her desk, and left. Downstairs, I couldn't stop myself from saying to Julian, her stomach condition is serious. You should be more careful about what you bring her. Julian suddenly laughed. Ethan, have you figured out your place yet? You're just a glorified caretaker to Chloe. That's why you have to remember all these little details. But I'm different. She loves me, so I don't have to. He leaned in closer, a smirk playing on his lips. Even if I gave her poison, she would take it without a second thought. Do you understand? I knew he was right. When Chloe got home that night, she was terrifyingly pale. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water and nearly dropped it when I heard her come in. My voice was tight. You didn't take the medicine? She collapsed weakly onto the sofa, her bangs plastered to her forehead with cold sweat. It got too bad. I had to go to the hospital to get my stomach pumped. Hearing that, I brought her a glass of warm water and knelt down to gently massage her stomach. After she drank the water, feeling my soothing touch, her tense expression finally softened. She leaned against my shoulder and drifted off to sleep. It was just like countless times before. But this time, I didn't linger, didn't gaze at her sleeping face. I gently laid her down on the sofa, covered her with a blanket, and went upstairs without a backward glance. The next day, Chloe took me to Julian's art exhibition. By the end of it, she had bought every single painting. Julian shot me a triumphant look. Even after all this time, I'm the only one in her heart. He leaned in, his voice a low whisper in my ear. If you still haven't gotten the message, I don't mind making things a little clearer for you. The words had barely left his mouth when the fire alarm began to shriek. Fire! Everybody out! The crowd descended into panic. I was knocked to the ground, my ankle twisting sharply beneath me. The pain was so intense my vision went black. I struggled to get up, but then I saw Chloe fighting her way back into the building, against the tide of fleeing people. "Julian, where are you?" she screamed, her voice filled with a terror I had never heard before. A moment later, she found a terrified Julian, grabbed him, and dragged him toward the exit without a single look back. I was still trying desperately to stand when, with a deafening crack, a burning ceiling beam came crashing down. When I woke up again, the first thing I saw was a blinding white ceiling. "Ethan, you're finally awake." My best friend, Leo, rushed to my bedside, his bloodshot eyes filled with relief. "You scared the hell out of me, man. Do you have any idea how close you came to dying?" I tried to move my neck, but my whole body ached as if every bone had been broken and reset. "Where's Chloe?" I asked, my voice a raw whisper. Leo's face soured instantly. "She's with Julian, of course. You only have a broken rib. Mr. Vance, on the other hand, has a scrape. He requires her full attention." I closed my eyes, the pain in my chest making it hard to breathe. Leo's brow furrowed, his voice thick with anger. "She's all better now, but she won't even talk about a future with you. How much longer are you going to let her treat you like this?" After a long silence, I finally spoke. "I'm getting a visa. As soon as it's approved, I'm leaving." The words were barely out of my mouth when the door to my room was thrown open. Chloe stood in the doorway, her expression dark. "Who's leaving?" I dropped my gaze, avoiding her searching eyes. "It's nothing. Leo's busy. He was just about to head out." Leo shot me a look, hesitating, but ultimately didn't call my bluff. He just shot Chloe a venomous glare. "Ethan, call me if you need anything." Once the door closed, Chloe walked to my bed, a hint of apology in her voice. "It was so chaotic. I didn't see you." "It's fine," I said, cutting her off calmly. I reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. As I shifted, the collar of my hospital gown slipped, revealing an ugly burn scar just below my collarbone. Chloe's eyes widened. "How did you get so badly hurt?" "They told me it was just minor smoke inhalation." I glanced down and casually pulled the gown closed. "It's not a big deal." Her brow furrowed. "I had no idea you were hurt this badly. I thought you just passed out from the smoke." I gave a slight, humorless smile and just took a sip of water. "I'll take care of you for the next few days," Chloe said suddenly. I shook my head. "Don't worry about it. You're busy with work." Chloe opened her mouth to argue, but her phone rang. "Chloe," came Julian's whining voice from the other end. "My hand hurts so much. The doctor says the cut might get infected." Chloe's expression immediately turned hesitant. I looked at her and offered a small, tight smile. "You should go." She clutched her phone, her brow creased. "I'm not very good at this anyway. I'll hire a private nurse for you." I nodded. After Chloe hurried out, the room was finally quiet again. I stared up at the ceiling and, for some reason, started to laugh. The day I was discharged, Chloe came to pick me up herself. "There's a charity auction tonight. You're coming with me," she said, handing me a new cashmere overcoat. My first instinct was to refuse. Chloe, assuming I was still angry, frowned. "I honestly didn't see you. When I realized you weren't out, I immediately sent a team back in to find you." I opened my mouth to argue, but closed it and silently took the coat. It was only when I got in the car that I saw Julian was there too. "Julian wanted to come," Chloe explained casually, "so I brought him along." During the drive, Julian chattered excitedly with Chloe, reminiscing about their childhood and his time studying abroad. Chloe didn't say much, but she responded to everything he said, keeping the conversation flowing. I just stared out the window at the passing city lights, a silent outsider. At the auction, Chloe bid on and won every single item that Julian so much as glanced at, gifting them all to him. Her extravagance quickly drew the attention of the people around us. "Isn't that Chloe Vanderbilt? I heard her boyfriend took care of her for 3 years. She must really be in love." Amid the whispers, someone mistook Julian for me. "Wait, that's not Mr. Hayes from the society pages. Isn't that the guy who dumped her a few years ago?" Chloe froze when she heard that, then seemed to remember I was there and turned to me. "Is there anything you want?" Just then, the auctioneer presented a pair of sapphire cufflinks that gleamed like the deep ocean under the lights. My eyes lingered on them for just a second too long. Chloe immediately raised her paddle. 10 million, Julian suddenly spoke up. "Those cufflinks have quite a history. They were a gift from a European princess to her lover, a symbol of faithful, undying love." He gave me a pointed look. "They seem perfect for Mr. Hayes." Chloe's hand faltered. Then she turned and gave the box to Julian. "These are a better fit for you." Julian feigned hesitation. "Oh, I couldn't. Weren't these the ones Ethan wanted? I'll get him something else." Chloe said, turning to me. What do you want? I lowered my eyes, a bitter, self-mocking smile touching my lips. A gift symbolizing faithfulness. She couldn't give it to me, but she could give it to Julian. Nothing, I said quietly. After the auction, as guests began to leave, Julian cornered me while Chloe was busy talking to some associates. You see it now, don't you, Ethan? He hissed. I'm the one Chloe loves. If you keep hanging around, you'll only make her despise you. I looked at him, my expression perfectly calm. You'll get what you want. Julian frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer, just turned to walk away. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air behind me. I whipped around to see Julian tumbling down a flight of stairs. Chloe rushed over and shoved me so hard I stumbled back into a wall. What did Julian ever do to you? She screamed, her eyes blazing. Why would you hurt him like this? Her gaze was glacial. Even if I failed to protect you before, you take it out on me. Why would you hurt him? With my back pressed against the cold wall, I answered in a quiet but firm voice. I didn't. Julian weakly grabbed her hand. Chloe, it was my fault. I was careless. It has nothing to do with Ethan. Chloe shot me a cold glare. You don't have to cover for him. She bent down to help Julian up, then said to me, I'm not dealing with you. Find your own way home. I stood frozen, watching her hurry away with Julian, my hand instinctively going to the plane ticket in my pocket. A flight to London 1 week from now. It would carry away all my love and all my pain. She wouldn't have to see me as a burden anymore. Soon, this burden would be gone from her world for good. The next day, I was woken by a commotion downstairs to find the living room piled high with Julian's luggage. Julian's parents are out of the country, Chloe's voice called out from the living room. It's not safe for him to be alone, so he's staying here for a while. Behave yourself, and no more of your petty tricks. I gripped the banister, my face pale as I descended the stairs. I won't, I said. I won't play any more tricks, and I won't love her anymore. During the time Julian stayed with us, I saw a side of Chloe I never knew existed. She remembered he hated cilantro. She'd notice his slightest frown and immediately have a dish he disliked removed from the table. During thunderstorms, she would rush to Julian's side. Her private study, a room I had never been allowed to enter, was now a place he could access freely. I finally understood what Chloe was like when she was in love. I thought back on all the times I'd felt a secret thrill when my presence alone was enough to stop her from hurting herself during one of her episodes. I had mistaken it for a sign that she was starting to care for me. How laughable. One day, as I passed her study, I caught a glimpse of Julian toying with something. I paused, peering through the crack in the door. In his hand was the antique jade pendant Chloe's grandmother had left her. It wobbled precariously in his fingers, nearly falling several times. My heart leaped into my throat. I burst into the room and snatched it from his hand. What are you doing? That was her grandmother's. You can't just... Julian snatched it back impatiently. None of your business. Then, seeing the panic on my face, a cruel smirk spread across his. Oh, you really care about this, don't you? He deliberately opened his hand. The pendant crashed to the floor, shattering in two. My heart stopped. It was Chloe's most treasured possession, an heirloom her grandmother had given her with her dying breath. What's going on? Chloe's voice came from the doorway. I looked up to see her standing there, her face a thundercloud as she stared at the broken pieces on the floor. Julian spoke first, his voice dripping with false injury. Ethan broke it. I was just looking at it, and he rushed in and tried to grab it from me. Chloe's eyes turned to ice. Ethan, how could you? I cut her off, my voice quiet. There's a security camera in this room. You can see for yourself what happened. The air in the room froze. The color drained from Julian's face. He quickly and grudgingly changed his story. I'm sorry, Chloe. I broke it by accident. Was it important? I can buy you a new one exactly the same. To my astonishment, Chloe's anger vanished in an instant. She rushed to Julian's side and took his hand. Did you hurt yourself? I stood rooted to the spot, watching her meticulously check Julian's fingers for any cuts, feeling as if a piece of my own heart had been carved out. No one knew better than I did how much that pendant meant to her. After that day, I spent most of my time in my room. Then, one night at dinner, Julian suddenly clutched his stomach, crying out in pain before collapsing into Chloe's arms, his face as white as a sheet. What's happening? Chloe cried, panicking and immediately calling her private physician. After a quick examination, the doctor's expression was grim. He's been poisoned. The entire mansion was thrown into chaos. The staff stood by, trembling. The butler began interrogating the kitchen staff about dinner preparations. A young maid spoke up timidly. I saw Mr. Hayes put something in the soup. Chloe's eyes froze over. She strode towards me and seized my wrist, her grip so tight I thought the bones would snap. "You try to kill him over a piece of jade? Ethan, what has happened to you?" "I didn't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her eyes were hard as steel. "Still lying?" She turned to the staff. "Bring me the rest of that soup." My eyes widened in horror. "What are you doing?" Chloe grabbed my chin, her voice like ice. "I'm going to teach you a lesson, so you'll remember what happens when you cross a line." A maid brought the rest of the soup and, at Chloe's signal, they forced it down my throat. I struggled, but 2 of her security guards held me fast. The warm liquid was forced down my throat, and I choked violently. The poison worked fast. An agonizing pain seized me, and I collapsed to my knees, my back instantly drenched in a cold sweat. Chloe didn't spare me a single glance. She remained at Julian's bedside, carefully helping him sip water, gently dabbing his forehead with a cool cloth, her expression softer and more tender than I had ever seen it. Julian weakly took her hand. "Chloe, about Ethan." She shushed him gently. "Don't speak up for him. You just need to rest." My consciousness began to fade, the searing pain turning my vision black. The last thing I remember is being roughly hauled into an ambulance. I was in the hospital for a full day. No one came to visit. When I returned to the mansion the next day, it was empty. My phone buzzed. It was a picture from Julian. In it, Chloe had her arm wrapped around his, both of them smiling radiantly under a brilliant blue sky, the ocean sparkling behind them. I quietly locked my screen and began to pack. As I zipped the suitcase shut, it struck me how few of my own things were in this house I had lived in for 3 years. A single carry-on suitcase held every trace of my existence here. I had never really belonged, just as I had never found a way into her heart. "Have you learned your lesson?" Chloe's voice suddenly came from behind me. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, dressed in black, her brow furrowed as she studied me. I said quietly, "Yes, I have. My mistake was falling in love with you. My mistake was stubbornly staying by your side all these years." Her expression softened slightly. "Good, now get changed. We're going to a party." Her words caught me off guard. Her frown deepened, her voice edged with disbelief. "Don't you remember what day it is? It's my birthday." And then it hit me. It was her birthday. In previous years, by this time, I would have already had a cake ready, a carefully chosen gift wrapped, and everything decorated by hand. I remembered her favorite flavors, the decorations she hated, every single one of her birthday wishes. But this year, I had completely forgotten. "You go on ahead," I said quietly. "I'll get changed and grab your gift, and I'll meet you there." "Chloe," Julian's voice called from downstairs, dripping with possessiveness. "Everyone's waiting for you." Chloe nodded, then gave me one last look. "Hurry up." With that, she turned and left. I stood there as her footsteps faded, watching until her back disappeared down the hall, a bitter smile playing on my lips. "Chloe, my birthday gift to you is my disappearance. I'm setting you free to be with Julian, and I'm finally setting myself free." I picked up my packed suitcase, gave the room one last look, and walked out without turning back. At the bustling airport, standing before my gate, I took out my phone and sent Chloe one final message. "Chloe, I'm gone. I wish you and Julian a lifetime of happiness together." Then I switched off my phone and walked toward the gate. 3 years of devotion, shattered in a single day. Our paths would now diverge, forever. Meanwhile, in the most opulent hotel in New York City, the party was in full swing. As one of the city's most powerful families, the birthday celebration for Chloe Vanderbilt, the heiress to Vanderbilt Enterprises, was the event of the season. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite. Yet the woman at the center of it all seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. Her friends noticed her distraction, and the cause of it. "It's weird. Why isn't Ethan here yet?" one of them, Scarlett, whispered. "Don't tell me he forgot?" "No way," another replied. "In all these years, have you ever known Ethan to forget anything that has to do with Chloe?" "That's true, but the party's half over. I don't think he's ever been this late before." The friends exchanged worried glances before their eyes all settled back on Chloe. Seeing her staring into space, Scarlett finally broke the silence. "Chloe, maybe you should try calling Ethan again?" Chloe shook her head, an automatic refusal. "No, it's fine. He's just getting my gift ready." Her friends thought it was strange, but they let the subject drop. Just then, it was time to open presents. Scarlett and the others gave Chloe their gifts. Soon, it was Julian's turn. Although Scarlett and her friends still despised Julian for abandoning Chloe, it was her birthday, so they held their tongues. He presented his gift with a flourish. "Chloe, this is for..." But he never finished his sentence. Chloe glanced at her phone, and the color drained from her face. In front of everyone, she shoved him aside and bolted from the room. Caught completely off guard, Julian stumbled and fell to the floor, his face twisting in pain. He started to call out her name, But Chloe, the woman who had always put him first, didn't even spare him a glance as she fled the ballroom. The guests stared at each other, completely bewildered. Scarlett and her friends were just as stunned by the sudden turn of events. One of them suddenly remembered me. "Oh my God," she said, her face paling. "What if something happened to Ethan?" At that, a new panic set in, and they all rushed out after Chloe. Julian was left alone on the floor, his fists clenched in fury at their words. By the time Chloe sped back to the mansion, it was completely empty. Still, she refused to believe it, running upstairs and tearing through every room. But there was nothing. Not only was I gone, but every single thing that belonged to me had vanished as well. She stood, lost, in the empty room, staring at the message on her phone and the number saved beneath my name. After a moment, as if finally remembering what to do, she pressed the number to call. She didn't even notice her own hand was shaking violently as she dialed. The call went straight to voicemail, the sound twisting her insides into knots. I didn't answer. As the call ended, the doorbell rang. She didn't remember walking downstairs or opening the door, but suddenly Scarlett and her friends were there, their faces etched with worry. The whole thing felt unreal. "Chloe, why did you come back here? Did something happen to Ethan?" She forced down the strange, aching feeling in her chest. After a long silence, she finally managed to speak. "Ethan said he's gone." Scarlett stared at her. "Gone? Gone where?" The others were equally shocked. None of them had ever imagined I would actually leave. For years, they had watched people come and go from Chloe's life as she navigated the aftermath of her accident. Even they, her closest friends, hadn't found the strength to endure her volatile moods during the worst of it. Through it all, there had only been me. I came to her when she was at her lowest, offering endless patience and forgiveness, never once thinking of leaving, no matter how much she raged at me. Why, after all that, would I suddenly leave? Just then, her phone rang again. She snatched it up, answering without thinking. "Ethan, where are you?" But it was Julian's voice on the other end. "Chloe, I think I sprained my ankle. Can you take me to the hospital?" Any other time, Chloe would have dropped everything and rushed to his side. But now, rattled by my sudden departure, she refused without thinking. "I'm busy. Find someone else." The words stunned even Scarlett and her friends, who stared at her in disbelief. Still, they were glad to see her putting distance between herself and Julian. Julian, for his part, was shocked by her blunt refusal. He gritted his teeth, his face hardening, but forced a sympathetic tone. "All right, is everything okay with Ethan? You seemed so worried." Chloe then remembered shoving him in her haste to leave. After a moment's hesitation, she said, "Wait, I'm on my way." She hung up and headed back to the hotel, leaving her friends staring after her in confusion. At the hospital, the doctor reviewed Julian's x-rays and handed the file back to Chloe. "It's just a minor sprain, some ointment and a few days of rest, and he'll be fine." Chloe relaxed, relieved it was nothing serious. As she was about to help Julian leave, a familiar figure in the distance caught her eye. Her expression changed instantly. Forgetting Julian entirely, she rushed forward and grabbed the person's arm. Fueled by the text message, she held on with all her might, as if terrified he would slip away again. But when she spun him around, she saw a stranger's face. It was the wrong person. The man, wincing in pain from her tight grip, scowled at her. "Who the hell are you?" She let go, embarrassed, and apologized in a daze. "Sorry, I thought you were someone else." Julian, having finally suppressed his irritation, limped over to her side. Seeing her still staring after the man, he couldn't help but ask, "Chloe, what's wrong?" She just shook her head and helped him back toward his room. After getting him settled, she stepped out and called her assistant. "Find out where Ethan Hayes went." That evening, at her mother's request, Chloe went to the main Vanderbilt estate. She was still trying to figure out how to explain my departure when she arrived, but her mother seemed completely unsurprised to see her alone. "You're just in time for dinner," Mrs. Vanderbilt said, smiling as she led her inside. "Our chef just finished. She made all your favorites for your birthday. Come, eat." Her mother led her to the dining table, but as Chloe sat down, she saw a strange man sitting across from her. An uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She gave her mother a questioning look. "This is Carter Sterling, your uncle's son," Mrs. Vanderbilt explained, before turning to him with a warm smile. "Carter, this is my daughter, Chloe." Carter smiled and nodded at her mother before turning to Chloe and extending a hand. "It's a pleasure, Chloe. Please, call me Carter." He knew exactly what this dinner was about. The Vanderbilts and the Sterlings were of equal standing, and with a business partnership in the works, this dinner was clearly meant to feel out a potential marriage alliance. Carter was aware of the two men in Chloe's life, but it didn't bother him. Chloe immediately understood her mother's intentions. Her expression soured, and she left his outstretched hand hanging in the air. The atmosphere grew tense. Mrs. Vanderbilt laughed, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. Chloe has always been a bit reserved, she said, gesturing for Carter to sit. Don't mind her. She'll warm up. Carter's smile was strained, but he said nothing. An heiress was entitled to her moods, especially one who had been through what she had. Her mother had hoped for a gentle introduction, but she hadn't anticipated Chloe being this difficult. When Carter tried to start a conversation, she ignored him. When her mother tried to mediate, she changed the subject. She was determined to be dismissive, acting as if Carter wasn't even in the room. At first, he was patient, but her blatant rudeness finally wore him down. He stood up abruptly. Mrs. Vanderbilt, he said, his voice tight, I don't believe your daughter is interested in continuing this conversation. Perhaps we should just call it a night. The dinner ended unpleasantly. After seeing Carter out, a frustrated Mrs. Vanderbilt turned to Chloe. What was that all about? I ask you to come for a simple dinner, and you cause a scene. Chloe hadn't even looked up as Carter left, just continued eating her food. You didn't mention he would be here when you invited me, she replied coolly. Our families are working on a deal. I thought it would be nice for you to make a new friend, her mother said, exasperated. Seeing Chloe's complete indifference, she sighed. Fine, if you don't like him, I'll find someone else. Chloe immediately put down her silverware. Don't waste your time. I'm not interested. Her mother sighed again. Chloe, I'm not trying to rush you, but you have to settle down eventually. I know you still have feelings for Julian, but please, don't forget that he was the very first person to abandon you after your accident. Hearing Julian's name, she should have defended him, but for some reason, different words came out. What about Ethan? Weren't you the one who always wanted him as a son-in-law? Hearing my name, her mother froze for a second, then blurted out, Ethan? But he's already left the country, hasn't he? Chloe's expression changed. She shot to her feet. What's that supposed to mean? Startled by her daughter's intense reaction, Mrs. Vanderbilt's gaze shifted nervously. What do you mean? What do I mean? You must have misheard me. She turned to leave, but Chloe was faster, blocking her path in an instant. She stood there, silent but immovable, a formidable barrier. Her mother had the distinct feeling that Chloe would stand there all night if she had to. A flash of irritation went through her. Why was she making such a fuss over some poor boy, cornering her own mother like this? Fine, yes, he left the country. So what? Seeing her mother's defiance, combined with her strange behavior earlier, Chloe knew exactly what had happened. Her face darkened. What did you do to him? At this, her mother's expression soured as well. She walked over to the table and sat down, looking perfectly composed. She glanced sideways at her daughter's stormy face and smiled. Chloe, don't be so dramatic. What do you mean, what did I do to him? He's a grown man, I can't do anything to him. He's just a boy from nothing. If we hadn't paid for his education, who knows where he'd be right now. Now, not only has he graduated, but he has an opportunity to go abroad. He should be grateful. Thankfully, he was smart enough to see that and agreed immediately. Chloe had never imagined this was the truth. She had suspected her mother might have had a hand in my departure, but she never dreamed that I would have agreed to it. The color drained from her face. Impossible. Seeing her daughter so distraught, Mrs. Vanderbilt's tone softened. Chloe, darling, if they can leave you this easily, it just means it wasn't meant to be. You are the sole heiress to Vanderbilt Enterprises. There's a line of men who would do anything to marry you. Why waste your time on those two? After leaving her mother's house, Chloe went straight to the most exclusive club in the city. In a private suite, Chloe drank shot after shot, the table in front of her littered with empty bottles. She drank so much that the world was starting to blur at the edges. Scarlett watched her, hesitating, before finally speaking up. Chloe, maybe you should slow down. Remember what the doctor said about binge drinking. Her other friends chimed in, but no one dared mention my name. Their words of caution fell on deaf ears. Chloe just kept drinking, glass after glass, ignoring them completely. Left with no other choice, Scarlett took out her phone and dialed a number. Julian was surprised to get a call from her. He knew Scarlett and her friends had disliked him from the moment he returned. He knew why, of course, but he never cared. As long as Chloe didn't care, nothing else mattered. Seeing that she wasn't hanging up, he finally answered. What is it? Chloe's drunk. You should come talk some sense into her. Hearing it was about Chloe, Julian rushed right over. By the time he arrived, she was passed out cold. Even he was shocked by the sheer number of empty bottles covering the table. What happened? He asked. Why did she drink this much? Her friends just shrugged, none of them daring to speak. How could they tell him, the only person who might be able to get through to her, that she was in this state over another man? Luckily, Julian didn't press the issue. He was more concerned than suspicious. He gently tried to wake her. "Chloe, how are you feeling?" His voice roused her. She blearily opened her eyes, but his face was a blur. Still, something about him felt familiar. So when he leaned in to lift her, she didn't resist. "She's had way too much. I'll take her home," Julian said, taking charge. Scarlett and her friends quickly agreed, relieved to pass off the responsibility, and watched him carry her out of the suite. Chloe woke up the next morning to bright sunlight streaming through the window and a pounding hangover headache. She frowned, rubbing her temples, and glanced at her nightstand. A bowl of hangover remedy was sitting there. A sudden jolt of hope shot through her. She threw back the covers and ran from the room, heading straight for the kitchen. She burst through the door, a name tumbling from her lips. "Ethan." The man inside froze for a second before quickly composing himself. He turned, pretending he hadn't heard. "Chloe, you're awake. Did you drink the soup I left for you? It's probably cold by now. Let me get you a fresh bowl." He turned back to the stove, ladled out another bowl, and handed it to her with a smile. Chloe looked at it for a moment before silently taking it. Seeing her accept it, Julian asked hopefully, "How is it?" The soup did ease her headache, but the taste was wrong. It wasn't like the kind I used to make for her. The thought of my name made her pause. Finally, she just nodded. "It's good." An awkward silence fell between them. Just as Julian was about to speak again, she cut him off. "Your parents are back in town, aren't they?" The question was so abrupt that he answered before he thought. "Yes, they got back 3 days ago." Then came the blow. "I only let you stay here because you were alone. Now that your parents are back, you should move out today. I'll have someone drive you." With that, she turned and walked away, not waiting for his reaction. "Chloe." But Julian wasn't going to let her go that easily. When she didn't even turn around, he rushed forward and grabbed her arm. "Chloe, what is this? Are you kicking me out?" he asked. His voice panicked, his grip tightening instinctively. Chloe winced at the pressure on her wrist and pulled her arm free, a new edge of impatience in her voice. "You never should have moved in." The words were so cold, so final, that they both froze for a second after she said them. Then Julian's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'll leave right now." He turned and fled the room. Chloe's hands started to reach for him, an instinctive gesture, but she stopped herself. She watched him go, her lips pressed into a thin line, and said nothing. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. JFK Airport, New York. A plane left a white contrail across the sky as it circled for its final approach. In the crowded arrivals hall, I felt out of place in my thin shirt, surrounded by people bundled up in coats. I dragged my suitcase through the throng, muttering to myself, "I can't believe it's this cold in New York in the summer. I need to find a place to change." The woman beside me chuckled, taking off her own scarf and draping it over my shoulders. "I told you it was an unusually cold year, but you wouldn't listen. See? Now you believe me." The scarf was still warm from her body, and it wrapped me in a comforting embrace. I opened my mouth to protest, but then thought better of it and stayed quiet. Beggars can't be choosers. I decided to let it go for now. Dr. Amelia Reed then smoothly took my suitcase from me and started walking toward the exit. We'd only gone a few steps when I stopped. "I'm going to use the restroom. Wait for me here." With that, I turned and headed for the men's room. When I came out, there was someone else there. A woman in a black trench coat was leaning against the wall, looking like she was waiting for someone. I didn't think much of it and was about to walk past her, but as I moved, she moved too. She turned, and I saw a face I knew all too well. It was Chloe Vanderbilt. "I knew it was you," she said, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. She didn't move closer, but she blocked my path completely. After a long silence, she spoke. "I thought I saw someone who looked familiar. I had to come check. How have you been?" I wasn't sure why she was waiting for me, but after a moment's hesitation, I answered her question. "I've been good. When I first went abroad, I was alone in a new country with very little money. It was incredibly difficult at first, but then I met Amelia. She started as my landlady, but she became my closest friend, and eventually my girlfriend. It was a strange coincidence. I was struggling to find work and a place to live, and she just appeared. She was also an American-born Chinese, having moved abroad with her father years ago. After years of hard work, she had opened her own medical practice. I had only intended to stay temporarily, and I promised her I'd move out as soon as I found a job. A few days later, we were talking about where we grew up and discovered we were from the same area. She had even gone to my same university, 3 years ahead of me. If she hadn't moved abroad with her father, and if I hadn't given up my own career to take care of Chloe, we might have met years earlier. But fate works in mysterious ways. We missed our first chance to meet, only to find each other on the other side of the world. She helped me when I was at my lowest, giving me a place to stay. Eventually, I became a therapist at her clinic. Because of our relationship, she gave me a great deal of autonomy and a significant voice in how things were run. When my years of caring for Chloe had left me feeling isolated and unsure of myself, she was the one who encouraged me, step by step, to re-enter the world. And over time, we fell in love. Chloe watched the small smile that played on my lips as I thought of Amelia, and I could see a storm of emotions in her eyes. After a long silence, she stepped closer, raising her hand as if to touch me, but then let it fall, hesitating.
Ethan, I'm sorry.
The apology was 3 years too late, but as she said it, I could see her thinking that 3 years was better than a lifetime of never seeing me again. The sudden apology caught me off guard. For what? I asked, before realizing the long list of possibilities. I had no idea which transgression she was apologizing for, so I just stayed quiet. Chloe began to explain. I didn't know my mother would force you out. I never wanted you to leave. I shook my head, cutting her off. Your mother didn't force me. She just gave me an offer to leave at the exact moment I had already decided to go. My words seemed to cause her even more pain. In the years I'd been gone, she had clung to the hope that I had been forced to leave, especially after learning of her mother's involvement. She had imagined our reunion 1,000 times, wondering if I'd be happy to see her, or still angry. But she had never once considered that I had left of my own free will, or that I would treat her now like a complete stranger. A sharp pain shot through her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't believe I could be so cold, that after all these years, I wouldn't even grant her the comfort of a simple lie. But she wasn't ready to give up. I know everything that happened back then, she said, her voice pleading. Ethan, I am so sorry. I was so proud, so ashamed that you had seen me at my absolute worst. Couldn't face you. I was young and foolish, and I let my pride get in the way of what was truly important. The corners of her eyes were red. Before I could respond, she continued, and I found out later how many times I wrongly accused you. I'm sorry. I was so arrogant. I always assumed I knew the whole story. It was only when she sent someone to pack Julian's things after he'd run off that she found the receipts for the poison he'd bought, and the leftover vials he hadn't disposed of. That's when she finally knew I hadn't poisoned him. That discovery prompted her to review all the old security footage, and she finally saw the truth of everything, of all the times she had misjudged me. But the truth had come too late, and she'd never had the chance to apologize to my face. Now, finally, she had that chance, but it seemed I had long since moved on. And I had. The truth had come far too late, and I was long past the point of needing it. What good was a simple apology now? Couldn't undo the years of pain. Too much time had passed, and I refused to let myself be dragged back into that darkness. Ms. Vanderbilt, is there anything else? If not, I should be going. My girlfriend is waiting for me. The word girlfriend hit her like a bolt of lightning. You have a girlfriend? She whispered, her voice trembling. Not understanding her intense reaction, I simply nodded again. I saw no reason to hide it. I was proud of the woman I was with. I paused, then added, actually, we're back to plan our wedding. We probably won't be coming back to New York after this. You're welcome to come, if you'd like. Just as I finished speaking, I heard my name being called. I looked up and saw Amelia walking towards us. Ethan, what took you so long? I was about to send out a search party. Halfway through her sentence, Amelia noticed Chloe standing there, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Ethan, who's this? I didn't pretend they were strangers. I introduced them openly. This is Chloe Vanderbilt, the CEO of Vanderbilt Enterprises. She's from the family I told you about, the one that sponsored my education. Then I turned to Chloe. This is Dr. Amelia Reed, my fiancée. The simple introduction was a double blow to Chloe. She had never imagined that one day, I would introduce her merely as a member of the family who had sponsored me. And Amelia's presence, as my fiancée, extinguished the last flicker of hope she might have had. Before Amelia appeared, she could have told herself I was lying, that my girlfriend was just a story I'd made up to hurt her. But the moment Amelia walked up, that self-deception was no longer possible. From the way I instinctively moved closer to Amelia, to the respectful but distant way I introduced Chloe versus the warmth with which I spoke of Amelia, it was clear that our connection was deep and real. I've heard so much about you, Amelia said when she heard Chloe's name, a polite smile on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. I had told her about my past, about growing up in a poor town with parents who didn't value education, who wanted me to drop out of school to work on the farm and get married. I told her how the Vanderbilts had saved me, sponsoring my education all the way through college. She had never connected the family who sponsored me with the Vanderbilts of Vanderbilt Enterprises. She'd never made the connection between me and the story of the poor student who had devoted years of his life to caring for the company's paralyzed heiress. only to be discarded once she recovered. Seeing the shock and pain in Chloe's eyes, Amelia instantly understood. When Chloe didn't respond, Amelia smiled and extended her hand. "Actually," she said, her voice sweet, "I should thank you for letting him go." And she meant it. If Chloe and her family had known how to value what they had, things would have been different. A man who had studied for over a decade to escape his past, only to willingly throw away his future to care for her, would have done anything. If Chloe had just said the words, "Marry me," none of this would be happening now. The tension between the two women was palpable. I glanced between them, offered a quick, awkward goodbye, and led Amelia away. Once we were a safe distance away, I gave Amelia a sideways glance. "You were acting a little strange back there." She feigned innocence. "Strange how? You must have imagined it." The wheels of our suitcases rattled against the pavement. I thought for a second and realized what was going on. I had to laugh. "You're not jealous of her, are you?" Seeing my casual attitude only seemed to annoy her more. "After everything she and her family put you through, you're really not angry at all?" "I just see them as my sponsors," I said. "Nothing more." We continued walking and talking, completely unaware that someone was following us, hearing every word. And at my last sentence, she froze. "Just my sponsors." The words echoed in Chloe's mind, taking her back 3 years, to the party her friends threw to celebrate her recovery. They had been talking about how I'd cared for her all those years. Now that Chloe's all better, Ethan's finally getting his reward. "The light at the end of the tunnel," one had said. Another had asked, "So, Chloe, when's the wedding?" She remembered how her expression had instantly cooled. "Don't be ridiculous," she'd snapped. "I just see him as a brother." Thinking back, she realized I must have walked in right after she said that. I must have heard her. At the time, all she could think about was how weak and pathetic those years of paralysis had made her feel. She was supposed to be the brilliant heiress everyone looked up to, a flawless idol. So she tried to erase that entire period from her memory, and in doing so, she pushed me away, the person most closely tied to it. She had arrogantly assumed that as long as she acknowledged her debt to me and treated me with a certain level of respect, I should be grateful. She had never considered how deeply her casual words might have cut me. Not until this very moment, when she heard an almost identical phrase from my own lips. "I just see them as my sponsors." It was a perfect, bitter irony. She gave a wry smile and pulled a small, velvet box from her pocket. With a soft click, the box opened to reveal a pair of diamond rings, engraved with her initials and mine. She had them custom-made the moment she realized her true feelings for me. Not knowing when, or if, she would ever see me again, she had carried them with her everywhere, dreaming of the day she could finally place one on my finger. She had finally gotten her reunion, but now, she would never even have the chance to show them to me. 3 days later, the invitation to my wedding with Amelia arrived at the Vanderbilt Enterprises headquarters. Scarlett and her friends happened to be there when it was delivered. Chloe's assistant, seeing only them in the office, hesitated for a moment before handing them the invitation to give to Chloe. The friends exchanged glances, looking at the crimson envelope. Finally, curiosity won out and they opened it. It's just an invitation, they told themselves, not a state secret. But when they saw the names inside, they all gasped. Ethan Hayes. Couldn't be. Just then, a voice cut through their shock. "What's everyone huddled around for?" Chloe had come out of her inner office to see them all whispering around her desk, and she frowned. Her sudden appearance made them jump, and they instinctively tried to hide the invitation behind their backs. "Nothing, it's nothing," they said, smiling sheepishly. But before the words were even out, Scarlett felt the invitation being plucked from her hand. She turned to see Chloe holding the crimson envelope. Before they could stop her, Chloe had already opened it. She saw the 2 names printed in elegant script, Ethan Hayes and Amelia Reed. The wedding date was October 21st. She said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line, but a sudden chill filled the room. Her displeasure was a physical force. "Well, we should probably get going," one of them stammered. Seeing her mood, no one wanted to stick around. They all quickly made their excuses and left. Soon, only Scarlett remained. Then, she saw Chloe take out the small velvet box. It wasn't the first time Scarlett had seen it. For the past 3 years, she had often seen Chloe take out that box and just hold it, as if remembering someone. It was obvious who that someone was. "When did Ethan get back?" Scarlett asked, looking at the invitation. Something felt off. After a long pause, Chloe gave a bitter laugh. 3 days ago, I saw him at the airport." Scarlett's eyes widened. He'd been back for 3 days, and already the wedding invitations were sent out. The message was crystal clear. She hesitated, then asked, "What did you two talk about? How did it Chloe cut her off with a shake of her head. He told me he was only back to get married. At that, Scarlett fell silent. She opened her mouth to speak several times, but in the end, all that came out was a sigh. What was there to say? Chloe had brought this on herself. Still, it was a shame how things had turned out. Everyone had assumed Chloe and I would end up together. It had been so obvious to all of them that I was in love with her. If I hadn't been, how could I have possibly put up with her then? But just then, a new resolve hardened in Chloe's eyes. I'm not giving up. He's the one I love. I'm the one who should be with him. Scarlett, who had always championed our relationship, just stared at her, her expression complex. Chloe, what's the point? You didn't appreciate him when you had him. Now he's marrying someone else. What's the point of fighting it now? But Chloe's voice was firm. The point is, I love him, and I will not stand by and watch him marry another woman. Scarlett was taken aback by her intensity. But he's in love with someone else now, she started to argue. What can you possibly do about? She trailed off, swallowing the rest of her sentence. But Chloe seemed to know what she was going to say. She just smiled. So what? If I could make him fall in love with me once, I can do it again. Seeing she was resolute, Scarlett just shook her head and sighed. Fine, do what you want. But she knew it wouldn't work. Chloe didn't seem to realize that once I make up my mind, I don't turn back. Just as I had resolved to care for her when she was paralyzed, never once considering giving up no matter how horribly she treated me. So too, the moment I realized I was no longer wanted, I had begun to plan my exit, disappearing from her life without a sound. Some people, it seemed, had to hit rock bottom to realize that what's gone is gone forever, and no amount of regret can bring it back. After everyone else had gone, Chloe whispered to the empty room, Ethan, I will not give up on you. Meanwhile, I remained completely oblivious. It had been Amelia's father's idea to have the wedding back in the States. Though he lived abroad now, most of their extended family was still here. He thought her grandparents would want to be there, and since most of our friends were here too, it just made sense to have the wedding in New York. Planning a wedding is a logistical nightmare. The date was set so soon that we were constantly running around, so swamped with details that I barely had time to think, let alone spare a thought for Chloe. But while I might have forgotten about her, she had not forgotten about me. In fact, she found me. When she cornered me outside a restroom for the second time, I just felt weary. The one time I went out without Amelia, she found her opening. It seemed I couldn't go anywhere alone in this city anymore. After a moment of silence, I spoke first. Can I help you? She didn't answer, just stared at me, her eyes wide, as if she were looking at a priceless treasure she thought she'd lost forever. Her gaze was so intense it made me uncomfortable. I frowned. Just as I was about to say something, she raised her hand. Everything went black. When I came to, I was in a room that was painfully familiar. I sat up, groggy, and instinctively reached for my phone, but my pocket was empty. Before I could process what was happening, there was a knock on the door. I didn't answer, but the person outside didn't seem to be waiting for an invitation and walked right in. The moment I saw Chloe, a sense of grim resignation washed over me. Of course. Ethan, she said, her voice gentle. Would you like something to eat? She didn't question my silence, just smiled warmly and set a tray of food on the nearby table. I figured you'd be awake by now. You must be hungry, so I brought you something. I glanced at her again, surprised she would do something like this. But I was hungry, so I didn't argue. I just took the food and started to eat. My compliance seemed to surprise her. She paused, then smiled. You're adjusting well. It was worth the effort to find all your old things and set up the room exactly as you left it. Her words made me pause. I looked around, really taking in my surroundings, and realized with a jolt that this was the exact room I had lived in 3 years ago. After a moment, I looked at her. Why? Why are you doing this? Why did you bring me here? Why go to all the trouble of recreating this room? She sat a short distance away, that same gentle smile on her face. She seemed to consider my questions, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, familiar velvet box. Because I love you, Ethan, she said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable emotion as she opened the box and pushed it toward me. I can't just let you walk away from me. Please, don't marry her. When I was at my lowest, you were the only one who stayed, the only one who encouraged me to keep fighting. I thought I could live without you. It wasn't until you were gone that I realized I can't. So please, Ethan, don't leave me. Don't throw me away. As she spoke, her confident facade crumbled, revealing the raw fear and uncertainty beneath. I never thought I would see Chloe look so vulnerable. But as I listened to her words, I couldn't help but frown. The way I see it, you can't hide love. Even if you don't consciously realize it, your actions will betray you. You'll instinctively protect and defend the person you care about. When I was in love with her, the moment I heard she was paralyzed and had given up, I went to her side without a second thought. It didn't matter that she was volatile and cruel to me. I never considered leaving, and Amelia was the same with me. No matter how many times I pushed her away, she was patient and persistent until her genuine affection finally won me over. I never ever felt that from Chloe. Even towards the end, when her moods evened out, her attitude towards me was merely tolerant, not affectionate. I lowered my gaze, hiding my thoughts. "And what about Julian?" I asked, my voice even. My coldness didn't seem to bother her. In fact, my question seemed to make her hopeful. "Ethan, don't worry. I can promise you, I don't love Julian. Ever since I found out he faked his fall and poisoned himself just to frame you, I made him pay. The Vance family no longer has any influence in this city. I know I failed you in the past. I was just clinging to a teenage crush. He was the one who abandoned me when I needed him most. For 20 years, I'd succeeded at everything: school, business. I rarely made a bad call. But he was a mistake. I was obsessed with proving him wrong, with erasing the shame of being abandoned, with proving to myself that I hadn't made a mistake in loving him. But Ethan, it wasn't until you left that I realized my real mistake. None of that matters anymore. All I want is you. I know I broke your heart, but I see my mistakes now. Please, just give me one more chance." Her eyes were filled with a desperate plea, begging me not to refuse, to just give her a single nod of encouragement. But I looked at her, and slowly, I shook my head. "Chloe, let me tell you a story. Once, there was a little girl with a very bad temper. She was always yelling at her friends and family. Her mother gave her a wooden plank and a bag of nails and told her, 'Every time you lose your temper, hammer a nail into this plank.' The little girl did as she was told. After a while, her mother took her to the plank and told her to pull out all the nails. She did, but even after all the nails were gone, the board was covered in holes. Chloe, you and I are like that girl and that plank of wood. Some things, once they're done, can't be undone. You can't just wish the damage away. The scars will always be there." After I finished, we fell into silence again. Of course, Chloe knew all this. She just wasn't willing to accept it. She was clinging to the slimmest hope that I could forget the past and start over with her. After a long pause, I was the one to break the silence. "Can I have my phone back?" My question sent her into a panic. She jumped up and started clearing the dishes, desperately changing the subject. "Well, since you're finished eating, I'll just go. If you get bored in here, feel free to walk around downstairs or in the garden. No one will stop you." With that, she finished clearing the table and hurried out, her hasty retreat looking very much like a flight. I didn't stay in the room. After I ate, I wandered around the grounds, testing the boundaries of my confinement. It became clear very quickly why she had panicked when I asked for my phone. She couldn't give it back. She had taken it, afraid I would call for help. She had given me the run of the mansion, but had severed my every connection to the outside world. I sat by the greenhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky orange, my gaze occasionally drifting up to the second-floor study. Chloe had been in there ever since I'd come outside, and she hadn't emerged. I truly didn't understand the point of all this. She couldn't keep me here forever. I was going to leave eventually. This was all just a pointless exercise. But Chloe didn't seem to care. She was cherishing every moment she could spend with me. On the third day, she returned to the mansion with a massive delivery of orchids. I had asked for them a few days earlier, when she'd asked if there was anything I wanted. New York's climate isn't ideal for them, but with enough care, you can make them thrive. With nothing else to do, I had plenty of time to tend to them. I spent the afternoon carefully transplanting each one into the greenhouse, meticulously caring for them. Seeing how engrossed I was, Chloe seemed to relax. "Thank you," I said with a smile, turning to her after I had finished. She waved it off, a wide, irrepressible smile spreading across her face. "I'm just glad you like them." She paused, then added, "Anything you want, I'll find a way to get it for you." If I were the same man who had once loved her, those words might have moved me. But she wasn't the same Chloe, and I was no longer the same man. All the love I had for her died the day she called me her brother, the day she fought for Julian and didn't even spare a glance for me as I lay at the bottom of the stairs. Every day I was there, the mansion became more and more like it had been when I first lived there. I accepted every change with a smile, and as long as she didn't mention it, I pretended not to notice. I spent my days tending the flowers, and she would come home from work and sit with me, working on her laptop. At dinner, she would sit beside me, constantly putting more food on my plate. One day, she had to work late and, worried I'd be bored, she sent Scarlett over to keep me company. It wasn't until Scarlett arrived that she realized I wasn't there as a guest, but as a prisoner. "Holy crap," she blurted out. "Has she lost her mind?" In contrast to her shock, I was perfectly calm. I raised an eyebrow. "I assumed you all knew." Scarlett shook her head, bewildered. But you're supposed to be getting married. How can you be so calm about this? I shrugged, a self-deprecating smile on my face. Panicking won't help. She's taken everything I could use to contact the outside world. All I can do is tend to my flowers and wait. My words made her visibly uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She couldn't tell Chloe to let me go, and she couldn't promise to help me escape. Her family's business, like those of Chloe's other friends, was deeply entangled with Vanderbilt Enterprises. They couldn't risk angering Chloe, couldn't put me before their own families. It was fine. I never expected them to. I had faith that Amelia wouldn't let me wait for long. 2 days later, it was my birthday. Chloe cleared her entire schedule. But when it came time to order a cake, she realized she had no idea what kind I liked. She didn't even know my favorite flavor. In the end, she just bought one of every kind. This was, I realized, the first time she had ever celebrated my birthday with me. Before her accident, a princess like her would never have paid attention to the birthday of the poor student her family sponsored. And after, she was too consumed by her own misery to think of anyone else, least of all me. As she slowly recovered, with my help, she learned to soften her edges, to be kinder to those around her. But even then, that kindness was never extended to me. She still resented me for seeing her at her weakest, and only maintained a facade of civility out of a sense of obligation. By the time she finally understood her own heart, I was already long gone. But she told herself it was okay. She might not know me well now, but they had a whole future ahead of them. She would learn everything about me, my habits, my hobbies, and make them a part of her life. When she got home, she presented me with a mountain of gifts, like a child showing off a prize. "Ethan, see if there's anything here you like. If not, I can send someone out for more." I had already prepared myself for this. Whether her love was real or just another performance, I was ready. But seeing the entire living room filled with cakes and presents still managed to surprise me. "Why did you buy all this?" I asked. Her face fell. She stammered, unable to find the words, and quickly tried to change the subject. I understood immediately. In all our time together, her focus had always been elsewhere, on her legs, on Julian. She had never really looked at me, so now, when she wanted to win me over, she had no idea where to even begin. I chuckled softly to myself and picked a gift at random from the pile. "This one is fine." It was a pair of amethyst cufflinks. They were understated, but I knew they were incredibly expensive. I caught a glimpse of the certificate of authenticity in the box. They were worth a small fortune, and were probably one of the cheaper items in the pile. For some reason, my mind drifted back to when I first arrived abroad, when I had barely enough money for a few meals, let alone a place to stay. I had been so desperate then, working odd jobs just to survive, constantly worrying about the future. If I'd had these cufflinks back then, I could have sold them and lived comfortably for the rest of my life. Maybe then I wouldn't have been sleeping in a dangerous part of town and nearly gotten caught up in a murder investigation. But maybe it was for the best. Maybe hitting rock bottom was what allowed me to meet the most important person in my life, Amelia. "Happy birthday, Ethan." Chloe's voice pulled me from my reverie. I lowered my gaze, schooling my features into a neutral expression. "Thank you," I said quietly. She handed me a slice of cake, her face wreathed in a hopeful smile. "Ethan, you don't have to thank me. This was all a bit last minute. Next year, I promise, I'll throw you a proper, grand celebration. What do you say?" I said nothing, just took a bite of the cake. The expensive frosting was smooth and perfectly sweet, but to me it was tasteless. I didn't want any of these gifts. All I wanted was to leave this place and go back to Amelia. If only Amelia were here. I missed her. I wondered if she knew where I was, if she was out there looking for me. When I got back to her, I was never letting her out of my sight again. This was the first birthday since I'd met Amelia that I felt absolutely nothing. Back in my room, I looked at a small star-shaped ornament on the desk and felt a fresh wave of despair. We had a signal, a way to find each other if we ever got separated. It had been days. Why hadn't she come for me yet? I sighed. The Reed family's influence was mostly overseas. They were no match for the Vanderbilts here in New York. I would just have to be patient. But if she missed our wedding date, there would be hell to pay when I got back. I had assumed Chloe's plan was simply to keep me here until I broke, but I soon learned her ambitions were far greater. With only a week left until my wedding, Chloe blindfolded me and took me somewhere. When she removed the blindfold, I found myself in a place that had been lavishly decorated. There were countless white roses arranged in the shape of a heart, and beyond that, the words "Marry Me" spelled out in orchids. And standing before me was Chloe, wearing a wedding gown encrusted with what looked like 1,000 diamonds, every hair on her head perfectly in place. Scarlett and her other friends stood nearby, their smiles strained and their eyes filled with guilt whenever they met my gaze. Chloe stood in the center of it all, looking as trapped as I felt. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes, when they met mine, were wide with a nervous energy. I could practically hear her heart pounding in her chest. "Ethan, I love you," she said, her voice trembling. "Please give me a chance. Let me take care of you. Let me spend the rest of my life with you." Time seemed to stand still. She hung on the precipice of my answer, wishing the moment could last forever. Hope and fear warred within her, until the spell was broken by a sudden commotion. She frowned, annoyed, and was about to ask what was happening when Amelia burst into the room, flanked by a squadron of police officers. "NYPD. Nobody move. Ethan." After a week of captivity, it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The moment I heard her voice, I turned, ready to run to her. But a hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Ethan, please don't go." The moment she saw Amelia, Chloe knew the game was up. Her stolen time was over. But seeing me try to leave without a moment's hesitation still sent a sharp pain through her heart. I looked down at the slender hand gripping my wrist. On her ring finger was a diamond ring, the mate to the one she had offered me. In the silence that followed, everyone held their breath. Both Chloe and Amelia were terrified I wouldn't choose them. Amelia was afraid I would choose the woman who had defined my youth. But after only a moment's hesitation, I reached down and gently, but firmly, pried Chloe's fingers from my wrist. "I can't. Chloe, I have a new life now. You need to move on with yours. You have to look forward. If you stay trapped in the past, you'll only miss out on your future." And with that, I walked away. As I left, I saw Scarlett and the others let out a collective sigh of relief. They knew that if I had stayed, my life would have been an endless series of days just like this one, trapped by her suffocating love, never truly happy. Maybe that's what it meant to be star-crossed. We had both loved each other, but never at the same time. When I loved her most, she was consumed by her pride, wasting her affection on the man who had abandoned her, while ignoring the one who had stood by her side. And when I finally left, she was filled with regret. But in this world, no one waits forever. A week later, the wedding went on as planned. I didn't invite my parents. It was his daughter's wedding day, but as Amelia's father walked her down the aisle, he looked more sad than happy. Wiping a tear from his eye, he said, "Ethan, I'm entrusting her to you." Amelia's eyes were shining with a happiness so bright it was almost blinding. She took her hand from her father's and placed it in mine. I looked at him and made a promise. "Dad, I will always cherish her. I will love her for the rest of my life." The officiant beamed at us as he continued with the ceremony. "Amelia Reed, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Ido." And Ethan Hayes, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I squeezed her hand, a huge smile spreading across my face. "I do." The crowd erupted in applause as Amelia and I exchanged rings. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant announced. I lifted Amelia's veil, leaning in until our breaths mingled, warm and intimate. Then, our lips met in a soft, tender kiss. In the back of the room, Chloe watched, a stabbing pain in her chest, as if 1,000 needles were piercing her heart. But she didn't even have the right to cry out. She had brought this all on herself. Her own arrogance had cost her the one person she should have cherished most. Amid the cheers and applause, she slipped away, unnoticed. Outside the ballroom, she stood alone as she was approached by 2 police officers holding a warrant for her arrest. "NYPD. Miss Vanderbilt, you're under arrest for unlawful imprisonment. Please come with us." Chloe was silent for a moment, glancing back towards the ballroom. They certainly had a sense of timing. She nodded, and without any resistance, allowed them to lead her to the squad car. The next time I saw Chloe was 3 months later. After our honeymoon, we had stayed with Amelia's grandparents for a while, until we couldn't put off returning to our clinic overseas any longer. We were just arriving at the airport for our flight back when I saw someone unexpected. She was sitting on the steps outside the terminal, feeding a group of stray kittens that had gathered around her. She was stroking one of them absent-mindedly when she looked up and her eyes met mine. She picked up the kitten and walked over to me. "Leaving for good this time?" she asked. I nodded. She looked down, a bitter smile on her face. "Well then, goodbye, Ethan. Have a safe flight." Chloe watched as we disappeared into the crowd. We would never come back, and she would never be able to leave. This time, goodbye really meant forever.